Yay. So, are we ready? Should we just start diving in? All right. Well, I'm really excited to be here. This is really cool to kind of be at University of Delaware, even though I'm in Jersey right now. And thank you, Carrie, for introducing me. If at any point my sound gets funky, just let me know and I can put my headphones on. I'm hearing the fan right now of my computer kick on, so please just keep me posted about the sound. I guess I would like to just start by telling you all a little bit about my experience when I was in college, because it has a significant impact on why I'm doing the work that I'm doing right now. When I was a sophomore, it was the end of the fall semester of my sophomore year. I learned about a student who I didn't know at all, but he was a student who was a year older than I was, and he died very suddenly of meningitis. And even though I didn't know him, it freaked me out. It really, I kind of pulled myself together when I heard the news, although I felt like a big rush of fear, pulled myself together, went through the day, and then that night at like 3 a.m., I was just woken up with like a punch in the stomach of my very first panic attack. And that began, although I had kind of had issues with anxiety my whole life leading up to this point, that really was the beginning of a real quote unquote anxiety disorder. And so I really started struggling. And at that point, my mom, not really knowing what else to do for me besides getting me into therapy, which was really awesome and helpful, she gave me that book called A Course in Miracles. And that had a huge impact on me. It still does. I still very much study it all the time. And I run a study group every Sunday night over the phone. If anybody's ever interested in joining, it's always free. But that started my inward journey, my journey in really looking for answers about how do you find peace in this crazy world that we live in? How do you live here when there's just so many things that need fixing, that aren't good in this world? There's also a lot of beauty, but at that point, it was really the fear and the anxiety that took over for me. So it wasn't until about 2005 when I had done a lot of work with the course already and kind of had, really wasn't having the panic attacks so much anymore. That's when I found mindfulness. And I attended my first training at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. If anybody's ever heard of that, it's a really, really awesome place. John Kabat-Zinn, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's the person who's really responsible for bringing mindfulness into mainstream America. He really did a lot to make mindfulness accessible to the average American. And he has this 8-week course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, and that's what I have my training in. And that really teaches mindfulness skills using secular terminology. He really took the Buddhist out of it and instead just taught it as the ability to show up, attention training skills, the ability to be present. And so for me, it's been such a wonderful thing, particularly on my journey, combining that with my work with A Course in Miracles. It's only helped me really connect with my true self, my inner voice, my higher mind. So the two practices of mindfulness and A Course in Miracles have just been a beautiful, beautiful fit for me. So I would love to make this as conversational as possible. I'll talk about mindfulness, what it is, and we'll do some practices to actually experience this. But please, if anybody has any questions or if you want to know anything, please do feel free to jump in and ask me a question. I'm happy I can see you so I can see if there's any hands going up. So I will start sharing a little bit about mindfulness meditation. So I'd love to see a show of hands. How many of you already have some experience with mindfulness? Awesome. Okay, a good number of you. Wonderful. This practice is really about, like I said already, getting present. It's really about showing up to our lives as they're happening, as it's unfolding. So How many of you have ever had the experience of maybe going from, in your car, point A to point B and having no recollection of like the trip in between, just kind of being on autopilot while you're driving? Does this sound familiar to anyone? Yeah, it happens to all of us where we have this ability to just sort of tune out and just get lost in our own head. And there was a study, so I get really excited about the mindfulness research studies because they're so cool and they're so interesting. There was a study in, I believe it was Great Britain, and these researchers went into hospitals and they interviewed people who were responsible for car accidents. And of those people who were responsible for the car accidents, majority of them, I don't remember the exact percentage, but majority of them were distracted, not by the radio, not because they were texting, but they were just totally distracted by their own thoughts. And that's kind of scary because, you know, we have enough that can keep us distracted, let alone what's going through our own head. So the ability to be mindful is really to be able to see when our minds wander and to choose to bring them back. And that's what this practice is all about. It's not that our minds stop wandering. It's that we recognize, we notice that we've drifted off again, and we choose to come back to this present moment. So the practice, the reason why we call this a practice is because we're literally sitting, drifting, noticing it, and coming back. Drifting, noticing it, coming back. Drifting, noticing it, coming back. That's the practice. And so it's not that our minds aren't going to wander. It's that we notice when it wanders and we choose to bring it back. And the kind of this motion that I was doing with my hands calls to mind for me how we're literally rewiring the brain when we're doing this. So just like when we learned back when we learned how to ride a bike, you had to wobble and kind of fall to get the hang of it. Or if you ever learned how to play a musical instrument, you kind of stumble and, you know, eventually practicing, you get the hang of it. This is the exact same thing in terms of the brain, because each time we notice that we drift, in that moment that we realize that we've drifted, we're already present again. We already now know where we are. And so we can choose to bring our mind back. And that's literally creating a new neural circuit, this loop that I'm doing with my hand. It's literally creating a new neural circuit in the brain, and it's firing that circuit. And so it's strengthening it. So we're literally changing our brains as we practice this in a very positive way. And again, the research has been showing that the change that happens in the brain is in a part that is associated with reduced stress, reduced anxiety, a higher quality of life. I, of course, have like 10 more studies going through my head, but I'm going to hold off on the research for a little bit. And I think it would be really helpful if we just dive right in, because this practice is much better off when you're experiencing it than just hearing about it. So we'll do some practice. I'll talk a little bit more, take some questions, hopefully, and we'll find our way onward from there. Sound good? Awesome. Okay. So with practicing, a comfortable posture is helpful, and you're welcome, though sometimes if you're just sitting on the flat floor, it can get, you know, a little bit stiff. You're welcome at any point if you do just want to lie down. It looks like you all don't have any meditation cushions in the room. I'm assuming they're not just hanging around University of Delaware. But just for the future, so you know, if you choose to sit on a cushion, it can be really great because it's kind of lifting your hips up above your knees, which can just create some comfort. So come to whatever position works for you right now. You can be sitting up, you can be lying down. And you're welcome to close your eyes, but knowing that you're completely in charge of your own practice. So you can experiment with your eyes open. You can experiment with your eyes closed. Either way works. It's whatever works for you. So know that you're completely in charge of your practice, and that comes first. and foremost before anything that I say. So we're just going to begin by gathering attention and directing attention to the sensation of the breath. And we're going to do this in a specific way for starters. So I invite you to place one hand on your chest and the other hand on your belly, and just allow your breath to be as it naturally is. So we're not changing the breath, we're not doing any kind of deep yogic breathing, we're just breathing naturally when we do this practice. And as you breathe, noticing for yourself which hand is doing most of the moving. Is that top hand moving up and down as you breathe a lot? Is the bottom hand doing most of the moving, or is it some combination of both? So just noticing this for yourself. And just continuing to breathe in a very natural pace, sensing this rise and fall of the breath in your torso. If you noticed that it's mostly that top hand moving, it's mostly the chest going up and down, see if you can soften your abdominal muscles to allow the breath to flow freely to and from the belly. If you're lying down, this might be easier for you to just totally allow that belly to expand and contract as you breathe. But even if you're sitting up, you can just very gently soften those abdominal muscles, even just a little, to feel some movement in the belly as you breathe. As a culture, we tend to be chest breathers. And when we're breathing high up in our chest, this tends to be associated with more of a stressed or anxious breath, or a more shallow breath. So simply by dropping the breath into the belly, by softening the belly, we can immediately create more of a sense of feeling calm. So as you sense the breath in the torso, as you sense the breath in the belly, seeing if you can, with your attention, pay attention to the rising and the falling of each breath. And it can be helpful. A tool that you might try to experiment with is to label the breath. So when you breathe in, you can say something to yourself like rising. And when you breathe out, you can say something to yourself like falling. And we're actually trying to sense the breath as it flows in and out. So we're not just thinking about the breath, we're actually sensing it. We're feeling that movement of the breath in the belly, in the torso. Now already you might have noticed that the mind has wandered 10 or 20 or 30 times to different things. If you notice that it has wandered, it's really important to practice non-judgment. So we just notice, there the mind goes again. There the mind goes wandering. And then we just choose to redirect our attention back to this breath. Sensing this breath in and this breath out. You're welcome to keep your hands on your chest and your belly, or if you'd like to just relax your hands in your lap, you're welcome to do that. Whatever works for you. And we're just going to continue practicing sensing the breath. Sensing that rising and falling. And noticing how easy perhaps it is for the mind to drift into something else. And it's simply our task to notice that we've drifted and to choose to come back to this breath. So our breath becomes our anchor to this present moment. And it's such a gift because it's with us all the time, no matter what we're doing throughout the day. With just a simple pause, we can turn our attention to this breath. Noticing where the mind is in this moment. And if you notice that it's drifted, choosing to, again, without judgment, come back to the sensation of breathing. And we're going to experiment with sensing the breath in a slightly different place in the body. So directing our attention to the tip of the nose. So we're gathering attention and shifting from the torso to the tip of the nose. And noticing the sensation that the airflow creates at the tip of the nose. This can sometimes be a place that's a little bit easier for us to sense because it's less real estate. It's a smaller area at the tip of the nose. So seeing if you can sense how the air as you breathe in is cooler in the nose, and as you breathe out, it's a little warmer. Seeing if you can notice that. And our task, as always, each time that we notice that the mind drifts, the moment we realize that we've drifted, we're already being mindful again. We're already aware of where the mind is. And so we can just simply choose to redirect with kindness and without judgment. We can redirect our wandering attention back to this breath at the tip of the nose. Sensing this breath in and this breath out. Seeing if you can elicit a sense of curiosity, getting really curious about the breath at the tip of the nose. What can you notice? Maybe noticing that tiny moment when the in-breath becomes an out-breath, and that tiny moment when an out-breath becomes an in-breath. Noticing and sensing. And each time we notice that the mind drifts, it will do so. Simply noticing that we've drifted and choosing without judgment to come back to the sensation of the breath. Sensing this breath in and this breath out. And slowly allowing your eyes to very gently open and just gazing at a point either on the floor in front of you, or if you're lying down, maybe just looking up at the ceiling. Just taking in what you notice. Color, texture, patterns, shapes, lightness, shadow. Just noticing through the eyes, through the sense of sight, what it is that you see. Maybe noticing something you haven't noticed before. And if you're lying down, you can roll onto your left side and slowly finding your way to press yourself upright, coming back into a seated position. So I'd love to pause here and see if anybody is willing to share what you noticed in that practice, anything that you noticed about the breath or just about your experience, or even any challenges or what your reaction was. Any brave souls? Oh, I actually can't hear. Carrie, maybe could you repeat the question?
Sure.
Awesome.
So she said
Thank you.
that she felt aware during the meditation, but then as soon as it ended, she kind of didn't know where she didn't remember the experience. It's weird because you can't see me. Here's my knee. Is that what you said? Yeah. She was just commenting that during it she felt aware, but then after, she doesn't really remember it.
Okay, so not really remembering after the fact, but feeling like you were aware during the practice. So that's interesting. It's possible. Now, mindfulness is all about falling awake, we could say, rather than falling asleep. So it's about really coming into awareness rather than drifting off. And so I know for me, sometimes when I'm fully in the present, sometimes I'm so in the present that I really kind of don't remember it afterwards because I'm not like repeating anything to myself to help myself to remember. So that is just one piece that comes forward for me. But it'll be interesting as you go and as you continue to practice to see if that keeps happening. Because maybe it's possible that there were some points where you did maintain awareness, but there was some drifting or maybe a little bit of unawareness, maybe of sensing the body, but still with the mind, drifting into unawareness a little bit. I don't know if you felt like you were present with the breath the whole time, then maybe just taking it at that's, for me, like I said, to remember things, I'm often repeating them to myself. And so it's possible maybe just that, those memories didn't need to be encoded so strongly. But thank you for sharing your experience. For yourself, just continue to notice that as we do another practice and as you move forward, just notice that keeps happening. Thank you for being brave and for sharing. Yes. If you could repeat it, please. Unfortunately, I can't hear unless you're like right by the computer.
She said that it was hard for her to keep her mind neutral, like images were fun. It was like the ocean. Mm-hmm. She saw colors like pink and purple.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So are you a very visual person? Do you tend to like see pictures? Yeah. So you'll notice that when the mind gets a chance to kind of just be still, it's kind of busy. Like it might produce pictures and colors and things like that. And that's a very normal experience. And that's where Buddhists have this beautiful term that I just love, that we have monkey minds, that our minds jump from one thing to another and they're busy. We have, thoughts that pop up. And with this practice, we can start kind of looking at those thoughts as mental events, as neutral things that the mind just does. The brain just produces these pictures. It just, builds these stories or just sees colors. It's just really just mental events. And we can just see it at that. And there's actually a practice with mindful thought watching where we can sit and just kind of watch the brain do those things. We just watch those thoughts come up and go. And it can be actually pretty interesting and kind of bizarre sometimes to see how much our thoughts can jump from, one topic to another. So when you notice that your attention gets into one of those things, like let's say a picture comes up and then we start thinking about the picture, that's when, again, it's just our task to notice, oh, there I am. I'm thinking about the picture. I'm going to come back to the breath without judgment. So the brain, the mind will produce those things. It's just a matter of noticing it and choosing to come back to whatever our anchor is. Right now, the practice that we just did, we use the breath as an anchor. You can use sound. You can use body sensation. It's really about finding something that works for you, especially in the beginning. And I'll share for me, for years, I couldn't focus on my breath because with my anxiety history, I'd start focusing on my breath. I'd start breathing faster. I'd taken too much oxygen. It would start making me a little, over-oxygenated and lightheaded, and it would mimic anxiety. So I had to start with other practices. Now I have no problem, focusing on my breath at all, but it is about, finding something that works in the beginning and not judging whatever comes up. So thank you. Thank you so much for the comment.
Sorry. There's a bunch of people wanting to talk.
Good.
Just going to comment on that.
So you'll just have to, please do comment, but also, Carrie, if you could just repeat the questions, it's helpful.
Yeah, I can even try. Are we wireless? No, we're not wireless. I was thinking I could bring.
Pass me around.
When you had commented, what came up for me was I was thinking, you're saying that you had a hard time keeping your mind neutral, but like pictures and things came up for you. And I was thinking that I think maybe it's possible to be like a neutral observer and still be like seeing pictures and things. That doesn't mean you weren't like being neutral or being mindful. It's like you were observing these things as they came up, and as long as you weren't judging them, or if you judged that you were kind to yourself after you judged that. That's sounds like you're still being neutral.
Yeah.
Other people say like meditation is it's just like I feel like I'm seeing things like purple or ocean or like pictures of vacation or like it's hard to that's not what
Did I just hear, I could hear a little bit more for some reason just then. Did you speak to how other forms of meditation, often you're trying to have a blank mind?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's such an important point. This is not about having a blank mind. There's so many different types of meditation. This is just one type, but that's why I love this type so much, because the goal is just to be aware, whether the mind's full or whether the mind is, still and blank. They're both just two aspects of an experience. It's not the goal to have a blank mind. The goal is to be aware. So like Carrie was just saying, that was so helpful, Carrie, about it's really a practice for us to be that neutral observer, neutral to whatever it is that's arising, seeing those things come and go and not judging ourselves for the mind having wandered, because it will. So that's why I love this type of meditation. I like to call it like the anti-meditators meditation, because you can't fail at it as long as you're willing to bring your present experience into your awareness. So the beauty of this is that you can literally practice anywhere at any time. You do not have to sit still and close your eyes. You can be walking from your residence hall room to class and know that you're walking. You can feel your feet as you're, moving, touching the ground. You can feel the breeze against your skin. When you're eating, you can know that you're eating. Mindful eating is one of the hardest practices for me, I'll admit, because I inhale. My tendency is to really eat very fast. But mindful eating is about slowing it down just enough so we can be aware that we're taking a bite and chewing and tasting and swallowing. So this practice doesn't have to be something that is separate from your everyday routine. It's really about how you live your life. Are you showing up and being present, or are we somewhere else? So I'm so glad that you brought that point up, because it's not about having a blank mind. It's about being aware and being present. Thank you.
Would you be comfortable coming up? Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, thank you. So I can hear you.
Oh, wait, we don't know.
Hi.
So I don't physically feel well today. Like I have a headache, my throat hurts, and feel very congested. So it doesn't really feel good from here to breathe. So how do you move past that?
So I'm glad that you're asking that question. It would be probably really helpful to do a different practice because if it's hard to breathe right now, it's hard to breathe if you've got, congestion or whatever going on. So it might be more helpful. And if we have some time, we can do another brief practice, sensing your body. So maybe just sitting and practicing sensing your body as a whole, feeling your clothing, touching your skin, feeling your body supported by a chair or the mat. Doing something else instead. So one practice is not superior than another. So breathing isn't better than body awareness, or, you could practice listening meditation. So I love doing this with just putting on some music, even dimming the lights and just sitting there and just listening to music, just taking in the sound. And when you notice the mind wander, again, just bringing it back to listening. And that's, again, just as important or valid of a practice as is the breathing. So yeah, thank you for asking that. Great.
She asked if that was what you were talking about, that like music could be an anchor.
Yes. So listening meditation is what we could call it, where we just sit and our anchor becomes sound. And if you think about it, sound only exists in this present moment. So just like the breath is only in this moment, and sound, just like the breath, is with us all the time, we can pause and just bring our awareness to the gateway, the doorway of the ears, and just listen to the changing sounds around us, both near and far, whatever those sounds may be. So that's definitely another anchor. I mentioned, so we did breathing. Sound is an anchor. Body awareness or body sensation. We have a practice called the body scan, where you literally can just bring your attention to the feet, to the calves, to the knees, and you just sort of scan the body from the feet all the way up through the head. So body awareness is another anchor. Observing thought, staying in awareness and watching the thoughts come and go is another practice. Even what we did with, very briefly, with vision, with seeing, you can practice mindful seeing. Doing this outside in nature is so much fun. If you maybe even just stand at a window and look outside, oftentimes when we're looking around, if we're lost in our head, we're not fully taking in what's around us. And so we can use whatever it is that we see as that anchor, because again, that's only in the present moment. And so it's about using things to bring our attention, our wandering attention, back into the here and now. So great question. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Saying about the image thing, like when you were saying breathing through your nose, like what I picture is like physical airwaves coming in and out of my nose. Like, is that normal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if you have, if you're a visual person, you might notice that like pictures and images come. So using that as an image can definitely help to focus on, a particular place. And that's probably especially useful in the beginning. What is really helpful to experiment with is really trying to drop into sensation. So we spend so much time lost in our heads that we can really kind of like be disconnected sometimes with our bodies. So ultimately, if we can, even if that image helps us sense, really trying to sense that airflow, sense that movement of air in the nose or in the, the chest or the belly, wherever it is that we feel it. So it's the sensation and that awareness that we're going for. The pictures, the images can definitely help. So great question.
Eventually try and get that to go away, or is that fine?
I would just observe it. Just notice that it's there. Yeah. And again, because this isn't about really trying to do anything except to just be aware. So let it come, let it be there, and just observe it. And don't try to push it away. Yeah. Thank you.
We got all our questions.
Awesome. Well, would it be helpful to do a short additional practice?
Yes, everyone's not.
Okay. Should we try, I'll see what the group wants to do here. We could do a body awareness practice, or maybe listening to sound. I don't know. You might not have anything more than like the airflow, which doesn't matter. That can work. but does anybody have a preference?
Body.
What's that?
People are saying body.
Body? Okay, let's do it. So again, you're welcome. Typically, when we do a full body scan, we do this lying down. So you are welcome if you'd like to lie down. We won't do a full body scan just in the interest of time, but we'll do a short one. The occupational hazard that we have now lying down with dim lights is that we might fall asleep. And if we do, know that that's okay. It probably just means you're tired. But again, our goal is to fall awake. It's to be fully aware and fully present. So if you notice that you're drifting into sleep, I'd suggest opening your eyes. Another thing that you can do if you're falling asleep and lying down, you can always bend your arm at the elbow. So your forearm and your hand is pointing up toward the ceiling. And if you start to drift, that hand will start to fall, and that will wake you up. It can also be useful to bring attention to the feeling of sleepiness, and that can actually sometimes help wake us up when wakefulness is our goal. So if you'd like to experiment with closing the eyes, beginning by first sensing the breath. And if you're lying down now for the first time, if you were sitting up before, you might notice how it's easier to sense the breath in the belly, to relax those abdominal muscles when we're lying down. And we're going to begin with gathering our attention and directing attention into the feet. So both of your feet, and sensing the feet. If you have socks on, maybe sensing your socks as they come into contact with your skin. Maybe sensing the place that the heels come into contact with the floor if you're lying completely flat. If you have your knees bent, maybe your feet are flat on the floor, just sensing the feet. And the same applies. So if we notice that the mind drifts elsewhere, all we're going to do without judgment is just bring it back to whatever body part it is that we're at. And we're sensing these parts, not just thinking about them, actually trying to sense them. So if it's helpful for you to bring any micro movement into these different body parts by like giving the toes a tiny little wiggle, that can always be helpful to just connect with sensation. So sensing the soles of the feet, the toes, the heels, and then directing attention upwards through the ankles and into the legs. So feeling these three-dimensional cylinders that we call our legs. Sensing the legs from the hips all the way down through the ankles. You might notice internal sensation, like your own body heat. You might notice external sensation, like your clothing or the temperature of the air in the room. Or you might not notice any sensation, which is fine too. Just simply sensing the legs. And each time we notice that the mind has drifted elsewhere, choosing to redirect that wandering attention with kindness and without judgment back to sensing the legs. And gathering attention and directing attention upwards into the torso. So sensing your entire torso from your hips all the way up through the chest and shoulders. Maybe noticing how there's movement in the torso from the breath. You might notice if you're lying flat that the low back has space between the low back and the floor. If there's that slight curve in the back, if your knees are bent, you might notice the low back come into contact with the floor. Just simply noticing. Maybe sensing the rib cage expand and contract with each breath. And sensing the upper back and the back coming into contact with the floor. Sensing any internal sensation, again, like your own body heat, maybe your pulse, your heartbeat, maybe a sense of digestion. There's a lot of systems in this part of the body that we might notice tiny sensations from. And bringing our attention now, directing attention from the torso into the arms. First, sensing your hands and your fingers, the fingertips, the fingernails. Sensing the forearms, the elbows, and the upper arms. So sensing these three-dimensional cylinders that we call our arms, from the fingers all the way up through the shoulders. Again, noticing any internal sensation, like your own body heat, your muscles, your bones. Sensing external sensation, like your clothing and the air temperature. Maybe even just noticing a lack of sensation, which is fine too. Bringing attention upwards now and just pausing for a moment in the shoulders. The shoulders are a place where many of us hold even the tiniest bit of tension, the tiniest gripping. And just checking in with your shoulders, and if you notice tension, noticing that, choosing to release that tension if possible, and if not, simply observing it. And then directing attention upwards into the neck, sensing the neck, followed by sensing the head and all of the intricate muscles in the face, beginning by sensing the jaw muscles, the inside of the mouth, the tongue, the teeth, moisture in the mouth, sensing the lips, and sensing the cheeks, the nose, that sensation, if you're breathing through your nose, the sensation that's created in the nose from the breath. And sensing all of the intricate muscles around the eyes, the eyelids, the eyebrows, And sensing the intricate muscles in the forehead. Bringing attention to the right ear, the right side of the head. And sensing the left ear and the left side of the head. Sensing the scalp, the entire scalp, and maybe even noticing any sensation that the hair creates. If you're lying down, maybe noticing the point of contact between the head and the floor, or the wall in your head if you're leaning against the wall if you're sitting. Just noticing this place of sensation. And expanding attention now to include the sensation of the body as a whole. So sensing yourself as one whole, breathing, living unit. Sensing yourself from your toes all the way up through the top of the head. Sensing the contact that your body makes with the floor beneath you. Maybe even noticing that place where your body heat meets the temperature of the air. And just sensing the body. And again, as you practice, if you notice the mind wander without judgment, bringing it back to sensing the body as a whole. Same thing if you notice that the mind is creating pictures or thoughts are popping up, just seeing those things as mental events. They're just things that the mind is doing. And then choosing to redirect with love, with kindness, redirecting that wandering attention back to the sensation of the body. Sensing noticing where attention is, and if attention has drifted yet again, without judgment, just redirecting that wandering attention back to the body. So bringing some movement back into the toes, beginning by just wiggling the toes and the feet, maybe moving the ankles, and just sensing what it feels like to bring this subtle movement back into the body after having been sitting still for a little bit. Inviting some movement into the fingers and the hands, maybe wiggling your fingers, moving the wrists, the arms, moving the legs a little. And again, practicing with mindfully seeing by allowing your eyes to open, gazing at a point that is comfortable in front of you or above you. And again, just taking in what you see, noticing light, darkness, color, texture, shadow. Simply noticing what you see, being fully present to what is being received by the eyes. If you've been lying flat, it could be helpful to bend your knees, bringing your feet to the floor. And if you'd like, you can stretch out and gently massage the low back by drawing one knee at a time into your chest. And you can even just gently rock back and forth to massage the low back. And just sensing this, being present to this movement. So this is a seamless continuation of our practice of cultivating awareness. We can be aware while we're moving and notice the sensations that arise as we move. And slowly, it's easiest to get up by rolling to one side. And you can press yourself up with your hands, and coming back to a seated position. There you are. So again, I'd love to just pause here and see what you noticed in that experience, and if you have any insights or questions that came up. I see a hand back there, but I don't think I'll be able to hear you. Thank you so much for coming up.
So I've had a couple of concussions before, and I've done the body scan, and every time I get to the head, I feel like a lot of intense pressure, and it starts to kind of turn into a headache almost, depending. And do you have any suggestions on how to combat that?
Interesting. So when you bring your attention to your head, you start feeling pressure and tension. Does that happen? Like, is that pressure and tension always there and you tend to just ignore it? Or does it really seem to only come up if you're closing your eyes and like meditating?
I think it depends on the day. Sometimes it's like there throughout the day.
Okay.
So I feel a little clearer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that was my guess. That's often the case, that we have, many of us have some kind of maybe physical discomfort that we live with all the time, and we distract ourselves from it. We're paying attention to other things, so we're not thinking about it, so we don't notice it. But when we slow down, we can notice that those things are there. So when you notice it, does it bring up an emotional response in you? Like, do any thoughts or feelings arise when you notice that there's pressure or tension?
Sometimes it's frustration.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part again?
Sometimes like frustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. This is interesting for any of us who have any kind of physical pain, that it's been shown in the brain that the sensing circuit, thank you for the question, the sensing circuit, what we sense is different than what they call a suffering circuit. So the actual sensation is one thing that we feel. Our feelings about that sensation are a whole other thing. And so I know for me, I'll give an example. The winter. I grew up in Florida and have for years just hated winter, hated snow, didn't like it at all. And through this practice, I learned that cold is just really intense sensation. It was my thoughts about that cold that added to my suffering. Like, oh, I don't want it to be this way. I want it to go away, that frustration. So with having had, a real injury with concussions and noticing, the things that are there, I would recommend seeing if you can just experiment with just letting that sensation be there. Of course, if there's something you can do to alleviate that discomfort, like maybe sitting up is better than lying down, whatever it is that might alleviate it, you would know best. So it might be that, sitting meditation works better than lying down, or vice versa. Certainly alleviate it if you can, but if you can't, see if you can practice just being with that sensation. Notice I'm not calling it pain. See if you can just practice letting that sensation be there and allowing it to be there rather than, wishing it was different or trying to make it go away. We can also observe the emotional response that comes up, so that frustration that might arise can be another thing to watch. So it can be another thing to say, oh, okay, I'm noticing now that there's feelings coming up, frustration, of anger, of wanting this to not be here. And can you just allow those feelings to be there also? Can you sit with them? The thing with mindfulness is that if we look at the sort of the underlying philosophy of this, is that we as human beings don't like unpleasant things. We like what's pleasant, we like what feels good, and we want to hang on to it and make it kind of stick forever. But in reality, how is life? It's up and down. There are times when things suck and they're painful, and then there are times that things are fun and great. Our tendency as humans is to want to hang on to the good stuff and to push anything uncomfortable away. We want to just make that discomfort stuff, go away. The thinking with mindfulness is that if we can learn to be with the ups and downs, with, the things that feel good and the things that don't feel good, the thinking is, and the research is showing, that if we can be fully with what's unpleasant in addition to what's pleasant, that we suffer less. Because we're not now resisting, we're not trying to push away an unpleasant aspect of our experience, and just letting it be there, we're almost softening around it, and then it's free maybe to even pass, to go away. We can sort of be with unpleasant and notice that comes and goes just like pleasant things do. So I hope that was helpful and not too much of a roundabout, lengthy explanation. But I would recommend, number one, if you can do anything to move, to shift, to create more comfort in the body, go for it. You can do that mindfully and with awareness. Number two, if you can't, if you just notice that the tension is there, see if you can practice, even if it's just for a short few moments, just letting that discomfort, that feeling of discomfort, just be there. I hope that helped. Thank you. Any other questions? This is so fun.
Hi.
So I actually have been struggling recently with health anxiety. I have struggled with anxiety in general, but health anxiety too.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually been told by a professional to stay away from body scans because it might exacerbate it. Because what usually happens is I'll have health anxiety and it'll manifest itself into physical sensations that last for several days. So the symptoms are real, but they have no biological starting point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if there's any way to sort of use a body scan or use a body mindfulness meditation to sort of help anxiety as opposed to exacerbating it.
Great question. I want to share with you from the get-go that was my anxiety. The anxiety issues that I had, 100% health anxiety. I would manifest all sorts of physical symptoms and if I felt a little symptom, it was the worst case scenario. And I learned not to Google it because you'll find whatever you seek on Google if it's the worst case scenario, So for me, practicing the body scan actually was helpful for me because I learned to not freak out over sensation. It's a slightly different interpretation of the body scan in that just being with the sensation This took, I will say, this was after practicing of really getting to know my pattern, you know, like knowing that like if I'm freaking out over health, something health related, it's my anxiety. It's just the anxiety and it's not actually something that's really happening. So really getting confident with knowing my pattern, I think helped me with this. But being able to just let a sensation be there, and not go, you know, I got to run to the doctor now to go get this checked out. It almost helped me learn to tolerate the anxiety better because I wasn't running away from it anymore. Because it was really the freak out part over it that, you know, wasn't helpful for anybody. And so just recognizing that sensation is there, sensation comes and goes, it changes. The body scan was actually helpful for me. So it's going to vary from person to person. And if it is an uncomfortable practice, then just, you know, work with something different. But I don't know if just that different way of looking at the body scan is helpful at all, because it taught me that I don't have to freak out over the changing sensations in my body, that the body just does all sorts of sensations all the time, and I don't have to ascribe meaning to each, you know, individual one. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
It does? Okay, awesome. Great question. Great question. I love that question. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? I'll just offer a definition of mindfulness at the end, since now we've had a little bit of a taste of what it is. This is a definition by Ron Siegel, who is a psychologist who does a lot with teaching mindfulness. His book I love. It's called The Mindfulness Solution. And his definition of mindfulness is awareness of present experience with acceptance. Awareness of present experience with acceptance. So like I said before, oftentimes we might be aware of our present experience and we don't like it, so we want it to go away. This practice is about letting it be there, accepting or acknowledging is even a maybe better word, because sometimes people, acceptance doesn't quite resonate. If we can just acknowledge, you know, what our experience is and say, hey, all right, this is happening right now. I'm just going to be with this. Rather than pushing it away, that can often be really helpful. Just to give an example, I used to wake up in the morning with a lot of anxiety. And my pattern in the past would be to just get up and start doing something to distract myself from it. I started instead noticing what I was waking up with and just letting it be there. And this is where my spiritual practice would come in, because I'd be willing to look at what was coming up with my higher mind, my inner teacher. As I learned to be with that unpleasant experience of anxiety, it was as if the sun fizzled away fog. It no longer, because I wasn't avoiding it, it no longer had fuel that I had been feeding it, and it would just sort of shift. So awareness of present experience with acceptance, seeing if we could just be fully present and allow our present experience to be what it is. You've been a great group. This has been so fun. I know we're past an hour now, and I know that you usually go for about an hour, hour and a half. So if there are any other questions, I can take them, or we can wrap up. You're welcome to, I know actually a few of you I think already opted in on my website. It's FromAnxietyToLove.com. On From Anxiety to Love, I share a lot of teachings of A Course in Miracles. I have a webinar on mindfulness and a program called Mindfulness for Miracle Workers that I'll be launching again in the future. So if you're interested, I have a free meditation that you can get through opting in from my website, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all that fun stuff. I hang out there a lot, so you're welcome to join me there. And I hope this was helpful, and please just remember that the moments in between, are just as much a part of your practice as the moments where you sit and get quiet. So getting up, to leave the room, to go on to the next thing, even noticing maybe that the mind is already like, ooh, what do I have next? Just noticing that and being present to what you're doing while you're doing it is the practice. So thank you, everybody. Yay. That was fun. Yay. Awesome.
Yeah, so I will think I've put links already in our Facebook group, but I can put another one. I love Corinne's YouTube videos that I love.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, they're just, like, they look so professional.
Thank you.
They're just, like, she speaks in a very helpful way. So I'll probably put this video or two that are my favorites.
Awesome, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty. Bye, everybody.